Welcome this evening at the 9 o'clock time slot in 10.2. I'm very proud to announce Muhaimin, and who will be talking to us about advanced MySQL exploitation. It's not just injection anymore now it's remote execution. So please give me a round of applause for Muhaimin. Thanks.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Mohamed Zulfarkars, and today I'm going to give a presentation called Advanced MySQL Exploitation. So basically, it's about how you can conduct a remote code execution and the MySQL platform. So here's a brief introduction about myself. I'm just an independent security researcher, unemployed at the moment, and I'm about to move to United Kingdom after this conference. So basically, I will be based in UK after this. And here is my email address, so if you have any question, feel free to drop me an email. So here is our agenda today. We're going to start with the introduction. So in the introductions, we're not going to cover the basic of SQL injection, but what we're going to cover in the introduction is basically the differences between the stack queries and the non-stack queries. And then we will have a remote code execution on the database connected that supports stack query, and also we try to compare with the database connected that do not support stack query. So basically it focuses on 4 different database servers and 3 different applications. And the next one, we have a remote code executions on the LAMP on the WAN platform. So in this part, I'm going to show you how different is it to attack a LAMP and the WAN platforms. And then the last part is I'm going to demonstrate my tool. It's called MySQL. So these tools, it's used to conduct a remote code executions on the MySQL PHP platform. So let's start. Okay. So I'm sure that most of the people in this room have a clear idea about SQL injection vulnerability. So basically, it's the conditions where you can manipulate SQL statement to the application. So in most cases, you will find that SQL injection normally used to read, modify, and delete database data. But in some cases, it is possible to conduct a remote code execution by attacking this type of vulnerability. So what is stack query? So stack query is a conditions where multiple SQL statements are allowed, and normally they are separated, being separated by semicolons. So stack queries have been commonly abused to write a file on the database server. In the Blackham Amsterdam 2009, Bernardo Dembele demonstrated how you can conduct a remote code executions by abusing stack queries in some of the database server. And today I'm going to demonstrate how you can conduct a remote code executions on the database connected that do not support stack query. So here are some actions you can perform when you attack the application that supports stack query. So basically, if you can look at this, all of these techniques can lead into remote code executions. And they are required to have a new statement creation. So I'll give some examples here. Table creations is used when we want to create tables and want to store our arbitrary data in these tables. And then a data injection into the table through insert request, that we can simply use the insert request to inject our arbitrary data and store it in the table that we just created. And the byte and byte injection through update and replace syntax basically is when you have conditions where your arbitrary data is bigger and you are required to use a multiple request to successfully upload the whole arbitrary data into this table. And then the UDF injection method is a technique where you can create a UDF function that can execute system commands, and basically you can just use the functions to conduct a remote code executions. And creations or execution of new store procedures, basically this is only focused on MySQL. So actually it works similar like a UDF injection method where you can use a store procedure to execute remote code execution on the Microsoft SQL platforms. And then the last one is a privilege escalation. So basically you can use an out-of-band injection technique where you basically connect back into the database server and escalate your privilege from a low privilege user to the high privilege user. So you can see here when you attack the application that supports stack query, so basically you can do many things that can lead you to have a remote code execution. And now, when you look at the non-stack query, right, there's not so many things you can do with it. It's boring and sucks. And most of the time, you will find that you can only abuse the non-stack query by using AND, OR, and unions. And this technique is good enough for a data extraction, but it's not really good enough for a remote code execution. So here is an example of the stack query table here. If you can see, on the top side, we have 3 different types of applications. And on the left side, we have 4 different types of databases. As you can see here, on MySQL, there are only 2 applications that do not support stack query by default, and they are known as ASP and PHP. So what we're going to focus on today, we're going to focus on MySQL PHP, as we all know that the MySQL is widely used with the PHP, and they are part of the software stacks for the LAMP and the WAMP environment. And here I'm going to explain on how you can conduct remote code execution on the database connector that supports stack query on some databases, so you have a clear idea the difference between the stack query and non-stack query technique. So basically on Microsoft SQL, it's pretty simple. You can just basically use XP CMD shell to create your arbitrary debug script. And the reason of this is because XP CMD shell does not allow you to write a binary. So basically you need to write a debug script initially. And then you can just simply convert this arbitrary debug script into an executable file. And then you can use the XP CMD shell back to execute this arbitrary data. And here are some limitations. You need to have control server permissions to allow you to execute XP CMD shells. So basically, you will find that most of the database server, when it comes to the remote code executions, you are required to have a high privilege access anyway. And also in the recent version of MySQL, you will find that XP CMD shell is disabled by default. So I think it's yeah. Hello. 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 Hello, I'm back. Thank you. Okay, so we come back here. Okay, so like I mentioned before, you're required to have a super user access to execute XP CMD shells. And most of the time you find that the recent version of Microsoft SQL, the XP CMD shell is be disabled. I think it started to be disabled since Microsoft SQL 2005. However, if you have if your current session user is a member of a system admin roles, you are able to escalate privilege. Sorry, you can able to enable your XP CMD shell without any issue. And in some cases that the XP CMD shell's been removed or been filtered, you still can create a new store procedures that actually perform the same action. So you can create a store procedure and can conduct a remote code executions. But however, this is also required to be a member of the system admin roles. And if you don't have a system admin role, so basically, if you know the username and password for that database server, I mean like a high privileged user, so you can simply use an open row set technique, which is known as the out bank injection. So basically, you connect back into the database server and escalate privilege of the current user to become the administrator user. So in the PostgreSQL, you can simply use the UDF injection technique. So UDF injection technique is a technique where you can create a UDF functions that can execute system command. So basically, what you need to do is you need to store your shared library in the tables first, and then dump your shared library into any writable directory, and then you just simply use the create command to create a UDF function from the file that you just uploaded. And then you can simply execute, do the same method to create your arbitrary file. Arbitrary files, I mean, here can be anything like shell codes or, something similar. And then you can execute your arbitrary file through the UDF function that you just created. And like usual, the limitation here is you need to have a super user access, and also you need to have all these 5 permissions. So basically, if you run a high privilege user, you have all these privilege and permission. So in the MySQLs, you basically can use the same technique like you do on the PostgreSQL, which is known as the UDF injection technique. So the only difference here, in the MySQLs, you are required to store your shared library into the shared library directory or system variable plugin directory. And then you can just simply use the same technique where you can create your UDF function that executes system commands. So you upload it into your table, dump it into one of the shared library, use a create function, create a UDF function that executes system commands, and then do the similar technique to upload your shellcode examples, and then you use this UDF function and execute your shellcode. Then you got a shell. And as we are going to focus on MySQL today, so I'm going to give big explanations about how you can abuse stat query. So this is only works on the MySQLs that works on the database connector that supports stat query. So basically, as what I concern, it's only ASP.NET when it works with MySQLs can have this stat query enabled. So if you look on the first one, so this is where you create your tables, and it has to be type blocks, and then you started to insert your shared library into these tables, and then the update and replace command is used because in most of the time you will find that your shared library is bigger, and you need to have a multiple requests to inject your arbitrary files byte by bytes. So that is why you need to use the update or replace commands to inject it like with multiple requests until the whole shared library is successfully uploaded. And then you use a select into dump file, dump this file into one of the shared library directory, and then use this create function to execute this to have your UDF function. And once you get your UDF function, you use the similar techniques, upload your shellcode, and use the UDF function to execute it. So the limitation here is you need to have all these permissions. So basically, if it runs as a root or high privilege user, you will have these permissions. And there are some issue here. First is in the old versions of MySQL, your UDF might be stored in the shared library. And basically, in Linux, you will find this directory is not writable by default. So this is different on Windows because MySQL Windows, it runs as a local system user. So you basically, when you attack Windows platform, you can just simply upload into any directory, including the shared library directory. So for security reasons, in the recent version of MySQL, right, the UDF must be stored in the variable plugin directory. And this value does not exist by default. So you only can perform this if, let's say, the administrator or the database user creates this directory for him to upload his own UDF function, and this directory are writable by MySQL user, then you'll be able to upload your shell library here, abuse the functionality, and then be able to have your UDF function that executes system command. Okay, so now I'm going to explain to you how we can do a remote code execution on some of the databases that do not support stat query. So in Oracle, it's quite interesting because Oracle does not support stat query by default, right? But however, there are some APIs that allow you to have your injection in the anonymous PL SQL block. So if you can find this, you'll be able to use stat query. And also there are some Oracle application server come with the built-in vulnerable PL/SQL procedures. So if you be able to find this procedure, then you'll be able to exploit it. And there are some, the Oracle introduced PS/SQL exclusion rate. So basically this is used to prevent a direct access to the procedures. However, there are a lot of different methods have been discovered how you can bypass this. And here's the delimitation. So basically, it's easier if you can find a vulnerable PL and SQL packages. If you can't find this, then it's very harder for you to exploit it. And also, like usual, you need to have a high privilege permission. So you need to be a high privilege user of the database server to perform these actions. And then there are a few different techniques you can do to privilege escalation to become a DBA user. And all these techniques have been clearly explained by David Litchfield in the Oracle Hackers Handbook. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the MySQL. So this is basically focused on the MySQLs with PHP, because the PHP MySQL is one of the database connected that do not support static query by default. So as we know, MySQL is widely used as a database component or the LAMP on the web environment. Right? So the static query is not supported, so which means you can't create function. You can't have a new statement creation. So that is why the UDF injection technique is not possible. So you're not allowed to upload your UDF file or create your UDF function and stuff like that. Creating a new statement is not possible. However, extending an existing statement is possible through union select. So this is the only way, the only method you can use to write the arbitrary file. And like usual limitation, you need to have a file permissions, and also you need to have a prior knowledge of the web server directory. The reason of this is because your trigger mechanism, what I mean is trigger mechanism is something that you use to execute your arbitrary data. Because to write it, it's simple, but to execute it, it'll be harder. So in the case of the MySQL ASP.NET, it does not support query. Your trigger mechanism is your UDF functions, right? But in the MySQL PHP, the only trigger mechanism you can have is by using your PHP script. So this is why you're required to know your web server directory, because this is where you can upload your PHP script and execute it using your browser or something similar. And also on Linux, you will find that most of web server directory is not writable by default. So you'll be able to find, if you can be able to find one, then you'll be able to exploit it. So traditionally, you can see that simple PHP script can be used to execute a command. So if we can just use a PHP system function to execute our command, so why we need a more reliable shell, which I mean is like a powerful shell. The good answer for this is a Metapreter and the VNC shell. So you can see here, Metapreter shell is very useful in the post-exploitation process. So basically, you can use Metapreter shells to conduct token impersonation attacks on Windows to escalate privilege of a local system to become an administrator user. And also, you can migrate from one process to another process using the shells. And a few other things you can do here. You can do a keyboard loggings, and you also can retrieve your MySQL password and stuff. And Metapreter in Unix is still under development, because what I found out is like to write a Metapreter on Unix is a bit like tedious. It's because of the random stack parameterization that you have on most of the Unix. So basically, it's still under development, and hopefully it will release in one day. And then the VNC shells is the conditions where if you, let's say, you want to have a GUI access on the Windows machines, and you want to use your Windows machine to compromise another system. So to upload your tools or installs or some of your tool will be harder, because you will find that most of the Windows application run as a GUIs anyway. So you can simply use these VNC shells to do your work. And then a fingerprinting MySQL, okay? So for remote executions on the MySQL PHP, The fingerprinting of the version is not required. This is different when you when you try to attack MySQL with the stack query enable, because you need to know where your shared libraries should be located. So this version may be in this directory, or another version should be in this directory. But however, when you want to attack some MySQL PHP, you need to know the amounts of columns that required on your second query, because basically you are only tied to use the union select. So in union select, your second query should be the same as the first query. But the cool things about MySQL, it doesn't care about data type. So it doesn't care about what data type you have on all your columns on the first query, because if you use a different data type on the second query, you'll still be able to fingerprint it. And then I can say the best method to fingerprint through union select here is if you combine it with a time-based injection method. So time-based injection method is basically known as a timing attack. So it depends on the response of the application. Because the reason of this is because sometimes when you use a blind or Boolean injection method, it will not yield any result. So here are some techniques in reading and writing file on the MySQL. So basically we use select load file to read a file and select into out file or dump file to write a file. So here's a brief explanation about select load in files. It requires you to have a file privilege, and also your file must be writable by world writables, and the size should be less than this value. And default value is small, but it's sufficient enough for you to fingerprint important stuff. Like examples, if you want to know web server directory, you basically need to load your default configuration of Apache files, and because this file contains the information about your web server directory. And then select into dump file also requires you to have a file privilege, and you can use this method with the unions and then to dump into one file. So you're only allowed to use one time to write the whole arbitrary file, because this file cannot be overwritten. So you have only one chance to upload the whole arbitrary file into one place. And also you will find that this file that you create will be world rewritables. This is because the MySQL server try to prevent you to backdoor, like example, your MySQL configuration file. So when it looks like, oh, this file is world writable, they will not read it. And the cool thing about select into dump file, you can directly write an executable file. So which means you don't have to think about any conversion trick that you have to do, like example, for some databases, like example on MySQL, where you have to convert a text to the binary. Because basically, select into dump file, you will just directly write into the binary. And also, as another one issue in Linux is a file is created is not executable by default. So if you upload your shellcode, it's not executable. And I'm going to explain in the future in these talks that how we can make it executable. So here is some brief explanation how we can conduct remote code executions on the MySQL PHP. So basically, we will upload our compressed arbitrary file into the web server using a union select. And then we can use a PHP script to decompress back this arbitrary file to back into the original size. And then we can use a PHP script system function to execute this file. And here's the methods how you can fingerprint the web server directory. Like I mentioned before, you can just basically use the load in file methods to read default configuration of Apache files. And another method is known as error message generation. So basically what it does is by injecting some bogus data as part as your SQL query, you'll be able to, in some cases, you'll be able to force the PHP to return you an error message. And in most cases, you will find this error message contain information about your web server directory. So as we know that the only technique we can use to write our arbitrary data through the union selects. And here are some challenges in writing the arbitrary data through the union select. So the main biggest problem is the GET request, because GET request only limited you to up to 8,190 bytes. And most of the time you find your arbitrary data will be bigger than this size. And also the second way is the data from your first query can overwrite your file header. So which means when you have a union selects and your data from the first query will be the data that will be written first, and this will overwrite your file header and it will corrupt your file. And then the next one is you will find that your data from the extra columns can add necessary data into your arbitrary file, and this also can potentially corrupt your code. So I'm going to explain in details how we can fix all this problem. Okay, so hang on. I'm sorry. Okay, fixing the URL length issue. So basically, we can just simply use this PHP zlib module to compress our arbitrary file. In my experience, from 9,625 bytes, I was able to compress my file only up to 630 bytes. And this was pretty small and can be able to bypass the maximum limit allowed in Apache, and also can bypass most of the web application firewalls. And this file can be decompressed back to the original files before it's been executed. So, and if you look at here, right, the unit select will combine the result from the first query with the second query. And you will find that the result from the first query can overwrite your file header. So to prevent this from happening, what can you do is you can inject a non-existing data in the while clause to force the application to return empty data for the first query. Like example here, you can see the first query written as a string called defcon, and that will overwrite our file header. So if we can change our question equal to 169 into question equal to any non-existing value, you will force the application to return empty data there, and then you can only write your arbitrary file. So you can see here after my union selects, that is my arbitrary data, which is my executable file. So as I already mentioned before, in the union select, the second query requires you to have the same columns as the first query. And to prevent the data corruptions, your arbitrary data should be injected into the first column. The reason of this is because our arbitrary data we compress using a zlib, and the zlib uses the Adler32 checksums, and this value is added at the ends of our data. In the RFC, it stated like anything after the Adler32 checksum will be ignored during the compression process. So basically, we can just simply inject any random data into other columns in this, from the second column onward. Like example here, you can see this is my arbitrary data. I ejected 2 null bytes after my Adler32 checksum, and I would have any problem when I decompress back this file back to its original size. And here's some simple technique how you can bypass the web application firewalls, IDS, and antivirus. So basically, when you upload your Metasploit shellcode, you can just simply use a Metasploit shellcode encoder to bypass some of these security mechanisms. And then base64 encoder can be used to encode your PHP script, so it can prevent from being detected as a PHP script injection by some of the web application firewalls. And then we can use gz compress and gz uncompress. This is a zlib library where you can use to compress your code to make it smaller to bypass the maximum length limit. Okay, so here I'm going to show how we can conduct remote code executions on the LAMPs on the WAM. So basically on the WAM platform, you will find that there's one limitation. By default, directory created in Linux is not writables. But in some cases, you will find the application that require this directory to be writables. A good example is the application that allow you to upload user contents. So if you can find this directory, you can simply upload your file, and then another issue is a file that been uploaded using into down file is not executable by default. So to change the permission, what can you do? You can use a PHP scripts to read the same file contents and write into another files, and then use PHP system function to change the permission of this file. And now this file will be owned by the web server user, and it will be executable. So you can just simply execute your executable code. And remote code executions on the WAM has no limitations, less limitation compared to the LAMP. This is because MySQL on Windows run as a local system. So basically, you are allowed to write anywhere you want in the web server directory. So the file also has been created, absolutely will be executable, and you can still use the same method that you used to execute this code by using a PHP system function. Okay, so now I'm going to explain about MySQL. So MySQL is a tool that I wrote to demonstrate how you can perform a remote code executions on the LAMP on the web platform. It can be integrated with Metasploit, so you can use it to upload a Metasploit shellcode and execute it. So here are some modules of the MySQL. So the first one is SQL injection detection, and basically to test your SQL injection, and then you have a fingerprint directory module to fingerprint your web server directory, fingerprint operating system to fingerprint what type of operating system it is, and then the payload, and then the next one is the payload is used to create your shellcode, and basically it will be integrated with Metasploit, and then the last one is exploit module where you can upload your shellcode and exploit it. So now I'm going to show to you how we can use MySQL to conduct remote code executions. But the only problem here, I have only one hand, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. Hello? Okay, it works now. So let's test the test module. So basically, it uses call it a timing attack, which is known as a deep blind injection method to test if the SQL injection variable exists, and also is to test whether how many columns is required. So if you can see here, the timing attack is successfully be executed, and it's required only one columns. And then the fingerprint, the operating system, basically it's just used to fingerprints to find out whether your database server is running on Linux or Windows. So you can see here it's run on Linux, so you know it's a LAMP environment. And then the third one is a fingerprint directory. So basically it uses two different methods, like I mentioned before. The first one is a load file method where it will try to load a default file of Apache configuration file. So if this does not work, it will use the second method by trying to inject a bogus data as part of the SQL statement. So the PHP will respond as some sensitive information. So you can see here the first method is successfully being used here. And you can find here, this is where our web server directory is located. So we can copy these information as we require to use it in the future. And then now, we're going to create a payload. So basically, examples is I want to create a Metasploit shellcode that bind into the port 9999. I can just simply use this argument. And now you can see the MySQL try to integrate with the Metasploit and trying to create a shellcode for this operating system. Okay, so now we successfully create our shellcode. So if we go to the exploit module, so you will find that you need to put some extra argument here. So as we know, our shellcode is bind into port 9999, so we can just simply copy this value. And then the working directory, as we had this information before through the fingerprint modules, and then the upload directory. So writable directory is required on Linux, like I mentioned. It's different on Windows, you require this value. So as example, you find out that this is one of the writable directory that I can use. I can just simply exploit it, And what you will see after this is some bunch of the compressed arbitrary data being uploaded, and then this data will be decompressed back to its original size, and then the PHP is used to read the file contents right into another files, and then change the permission of the files before it successfully execute the shellcode. And now you can see the Metapreter framework is trying to connect into port 9999. It's not connected, so I think we should try one more time. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. So let's see what's the problem here. Corporate shellcode, right? So let's try to create a payload on the different port now. 6655 is 6. So something is wrong here, but six five six, right? 656. I can give it a try one more time. That's not my full password, okay? Okay, I think I need to kill some of this process. I'm not sure what's wrong with it, but we will try, because normally it works. But anyway, I will just run as a root. I know it's a bit lame, but probably that can solve the problem, alright? So, MySQL pillar bind 227. Okay, now you can see the payload is successfully being executed. So now it's a question and answer section. So if you have any question, feel free to ask me.
Hi. Okay, if you have any question, please raise your hand. I'll come over with the microphone. All right, on the left.
Your MySQL tool, will it work for remote SQL server, or does it just work locally? Because this was just a local exploitation, right?
I can't really...
Was it a local? Is it only locally or remote?
Yeah, it works remotely. Yeah, I just do it locally because
you didn't
for
specify
the demo
some
section.
IP, target IP, or...
What's that?
You didn't specify any target IP or anything like,
You mean the IP?
Yeah.
It's actually in the configuration file here.
All right.
Because I was a bit in rush, so I couldn't show you basically everything. But if you can see here, so here's the configuration file. So you can have here's the IP address of whether your reverse shellcode or your bind shellcode will be located, and then the site is just sites of the application. And this is the most important point because this is where your injection point is going to be tested, and then Metasploit is just located of the Metasploit framework and stuff.
Thanks.
So it's pretty simple to play with this configuration file.
Hi, I presume you need PHP safe mode to be off so you can do system.
Can you repeat that again?
I presume you require PHP safe mode to be off so that you can execute PHP system.
You mean PHP safe mode?
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of PHP? Oh, you mean the PHP?
For this to work, it has to be off, right?
Like a PHP security mechanisms and stuff.
Yeah. Because no.
Are you talking about the Suhoshin PHP patch?
No, just PHP safe mode is like a global setting, and like by default it's on, and you can't do the PHP system call anymore on current distros.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but what I know, like examples, if you have a magic code, you have a problem with that because basically when you talk about magic code, you can evade the magic codes on your injections, but you can't really evade it on the file names. But anyway, if you talk about like some, I'm not sure about the PHP safe mode, but what I know in some, like PHP has a directory where you can locate, execute your file. So in that case, it doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the advantage of running this kind of shellcode this way rather than just uploading a simple, using a PHP out file to write like a simple PHP shell or something? If you're going, you're basically writing some PHP code that will create the Metasploit binary, right?
You mean why don't I use the PHP code, right?
Yeah, why not just use a simple PHP shell that gives you a file upload?
Why I just don't use a PHP code and a file upload?
Exactly.
And then upload the SQL file. Because I can say that it's still the same, but still the same methods. But anyway, if you use a post request, you're still required to upload the whole PHP script. So it's just punch like a long PHP script with a post request and stuff like that. So basically, you still can use the same method, but like what I'm going to show here is just how you can do it through like a binary kind of type of technique.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Hi.
Thanks. You said that the stack query doesn't work in Oracle. How did you found it? Or I think that it work?
Can you repeat that again?
Stacked queries.
Oh, stack query.
Yeah, and you said that they doesn't work in Oracle.
It doesn't work on most of the application. You mean doesn't work on MySQL PHP?
No. There was some table and there was Oracle and stack queries is not supported or something like that. Yeah, I think they are supported.
When I talk about the stack query, so I just focus on the database connector that I know, which does not support stack query. And because if you can see like oracles, right? Oracles are basically, and all the application that I listed down before do not support stack query. So when I talk about MySQLs, basically they are some MySQL support stack query or not stack query. But what I've focused today is basically on non-stack query because you hardly find a MySQL ASP.NET compared in what you find in MySQL PHP.
Anyone else? No one? Okay. Thanks.
Well, you mentioned some PLSQL functions in Oracle that were vulnerable. Could you list them?
I don't really get it.
You told us that this stacked query doesn't work in Oracle. But,
oh yeah, I mentioned about the stack query by default does not work on Oracle. So if you have your Oracle server without any procedure, vulnerable procedures, but you have your SQL injection vulnerability there, so basically you can't conduct remote code execution. So it only works on if you can inject in the anonymous PL/SQL blocks. So, but anyway, when you talk about oracles, a lot of people just focus on the Oracle application server itself because the application server contains a lot of vulnerable PL/SQL. So when you have these, because when you have a procedure, right, so you basically can inject in the middle, which means you can use stack query. But if just a normal SQL statements, a vulnerability that use a normal SQL syntax, right? If you use stack query, it's not going to work. So that is why when I talk about oracles, basically I focus about all these vulnerable procedures that already been existed there, but it's not the application that a web developer write.
Thank you.
Any last questions? No hands? All right. In that case, I would say thank you very much.
Okay.
And yeah, some round of applause.